Good afternoon. Allah. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, that's better. Welcome to this session. I think this will be one of the hottest sessions today. So, are you guys ready?
Yeah.
You ready?
Yeah.
Good. So can I call my panelists to please come to the fore? And this will be Wanjau, Fiona, Ibele, and Esther Wanjau. So how we're going to do it is we'll have a discussion with my panelists. I'll have a discussion with my panelists. Then we'll open up to the audience at some point. So when you have your questions, just move on. I want to see a lot. Fiona, Ibele. So, as my panelists are moving in, can I ask a question? How many of you don't use WhatsApp? How many of you don't use WhatsApp? All of you use WhatsApp? How many of you don't use Skype? How many of you don't use Facebook? Okay, so the whole discussion about the OTT is getting hot. There are different views on regulation, especially on policy issues, and that will be our topic of discussion this afternoon. Would you mind coming on this side, please? So we have a balance, sort of. So I'll give my panelists some 2 minutes to introduce themselves, the organizations that they work for, and then we'll take it on from there. So I'll start from there.
I've already introduced myself. I'm Ibele Okome. I head public policy for Africa for Facebook.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm Fiona, Technology Service Providers of Kenya.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ezekiel Mutua, CEO Kenya Film Classification Board.
Good afternoon. My name is Esther Wanjau. I'm a Deputy Director in the Department of Information, Ministry of Information.
Thank you. So you know who we have on a very able panel. So, just to set the scene for ourselves and the panelists, there are 3 key areas where OTT, the discussion about OTT and policy issues actually fall in. And these are regulatory balances, and this is actually propagated mostly by telcos, security issues, and I think on security issues and safety of the customer, I think Ezekiel has some very strong feelings about that, and the impact on the economy. So I will just quickly go through my panel and ask them to just give me their perspective on whether we should or should not regulate.
Okay, I think the first question, so I should say that I work for Facebook, but I represent the Facebook family of apps, so that includes WhatsApp, but it also includes Instagram. And so I would say a couple of things. First of all, whenever you're talking about regulation, the entity who should be at the center of it should be the consumer, the citizen. So we talk about should we regulate, the question should be, what is the world that we are trying to create for the country, for the citizen, for the people who are using it? So I think that should be the central question. What's the problem that we're trying to solve with regulation? Obviously, from a company like Facebook, representing the Facebook family of apps, we think that that what we're calling OTT, or what we would call online services, provide tremendous value. I think the other important thing to realize when we're talking about this conversation is that we're not just talking about Facebook, we're not just talking about Google, especially sitting here in Kenya, which is the birthplace of so much incredibly amazing content. We're talking about all that content as well. So when we talk about regulation, we're talking about what sorts of regulation should we have that will apply to all of the rich content that's coming out of Kenya, to all of the rich content that's coming out of Nigeria, to all the rich content that's coming out of Ghana. And will any regulation that we're thinking about make it more difficult for that content to reach Kenyans? Will it make it more difficult for that content to reach outside of Kenya? So I wouldn't say there's a yes, or I would not say there's a yes or no answer to that question. What I would say is that the question for every regulator should be, what's best for the citizens in my country? What's best to ensure that innovation is supported? What's best to ensure that people can continue to create and that the barriers to entry are not so high that you prevent dreamers in Nairobi, dreamers from entering the market? So that would be my answer to that question.
I think from my perspective, TESPOK did undertake a study in May. We concluded the study in May, and were investigating whether or not there was a need to regulate OTTs in this space. And one thing that came out clearly is that OTTs are just a service that is riding on existing networks, and these services can be developed by anybody, which means then that some of the services we are innovating as Kenyans, if we begin and insist that they must be regulated, will end up being regulated in other regimes. Because we can only control the regulations in as far as they are within the scope of the Kenyan boundary. Beyond that, then we are not in a position to influence whether or not the regulations happen. However, there is a strong tendency for reciprocation in terms of engagement with other regulators in other jurisdictions, which means then if a Kenyan developed an app that was really a good app and can be used anywhere, when it has to grow and move beyond the Kenyan boundary, then they need to go into that country, get a license. So how many licenses are we going to want our own entities to acquire? So looking at it from that angle, and we spoke to both the network operators as well as consumers of these services, and the reason the OTTs are becoming an issue is because there is a need from the consumers that is demanding for that service. So the OTT aspect is really consumer driven. In the past, the network development in the country has been supplier driven, where it's the telcos that are going out and reaching out and setting up infrastructure and everything. But times are changing, and what we are seeing at TESPOK is that the consumers are beginning to demand for those pipes to have certain content. The OTTs become the content that is in those pipes that the consumers are now pulling and demanding and asking for. So when we look at where our market is at and the level of penetration of internet services in this country, in as far as we are still trying to get USAC to achieve some of our goals and some of our objectives, we have a long way to go. And from our study, we did realize that we were not ready for an OTT regulated environment in terms of wanting the OTTs to come in and get licenses to be able to get the content to the consumers. We are at the stage where the consumer has only just begun demanding for that content. The pipes that have been set up by operators are still very empty. So the need to drive that demand up is still extremely high. When you find companies putting large investments and the usage of their infrastructure is less than 50%. Yet, if I want to serve a customer in say Busia or Malaba, and it's on the fiber network, I have no option but to lay fiber all the way. So looking at it from that point of view, we are yet to get to a point where we are breaking even enough to then ask the regulator to step in and put in stringent guidelines on access and who should be able to deliver that content into those pipes. Right now, I think the environment is suiting us well because it is driving consumer demand. And that consumer demand is getting more consumers online, which is a positive thing for the country.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I think I take pride in being a friend of the internet, despite the fight once in a while. Hussein has been my supporter. I'm very happy that I see very positive comments on the discussions on the internet platform. And I take you guys to be our friends, because the robust discussions that go on in your platforms, especially on social media, go a long way to inform policy formulation. And I think for us to be able to appropriate and attain the full benefits of ICT, it's important to have discussions like the ones that you create every so often on emerging issues on the cyberspace. And I think I want to begin by answering the question, should we regulate the over-the-top services? And my answer would be a balance. I think everything in life requires a balance. So it's a yes and no. We have a history in this country where regulation, not just for OTTs or ICT, regulation itself is dreaded. And Kenyans, because of our historical hangovers, where we have come from, we even resist good things. Anything that is not used in moderation is a recipe for chaos. If we had not made the same mistake that we are trying to make right now, when we embrace media liberalization in the 90s, I think we would probably be having more responsible media. And I think some of the statements that I make may not be popular, but I will tell you, I speak from a combination of experience and education. Contrary to the stories that you read, I'm not a zombie. I have invested heavily in this area. I'm happy my sister Esther is here, because I did 9 years for the nation. I was Director of Information, Kenya Union of Journalists Secretary General, Information Secretary, and now CEO. And my first degree, second degree, and PhD are on this area. I believe I'm the best Kenya can offer. Seriously. Probably. No, I'm serious. I mean, if really we are looking for, if you're looking for people who are going to offer something based on merit, leadership based on qualifications, I just think I'm doing a good job, and I'm doing it within the parameters of the mandate, but also from experience and understanding. Because I believe there are 3 E's that make great people: education, experience, and exposure. And the moment you get to a level where you can understand the dynamics that have defined how media has evolved in Kenya and the challenges that we face today, then you can also understand the challenges that we are facing in our attempt to regulate the cyberspace. First of all, regulation should not be controlled. I think that's a paramount, that's a fundamental point, that regulation must not amount or constitute control. The moment we go that direction, then we lose it. There are every benefit for us to embrace in the development of OTTs, for instance. Research shows that countries that have embraced the internet and ICTs, they invariably enjoy a greater GDP growth than the countries that fight internet or the use of ICTs. And so from a policy perspective, I am a champion of ICT. I worked as the information secretary of this country. I'm actually on secondment, that still remains my substantive position in the government. And I championed some of the policies within Dr. Demo on a daily basis. My sister was with us, so I support OTTs, and I support the growth of the internet. It promotes efficiency in business, facilitates interaction. And I want to quote, as I hand over the microphone, what Thomas Friedman said in the book, The World is Flat. And I don't know how many have read that book. I told you I've read well. I'm a learned person, you know. I want to see how many others are learned. I'm trying to catch your attention. I have kept back to Montreal now, from a different region from where his name comes from. But that's okay. So this is what my friend says. Allow me to quote it, because I think this is essential. And this is to tie the benefits of internet and ICT growth in any continent, and we are proud that in this region, we are actually an ICT hub, and people are looking up to us because of the penetration. I'm actually benefiting from the debates that you create, and I'm attending a conference in California this September, courtesy of Google, because they believe we are a serious policy regulator, and because of the ICT penetration and mobile telephony availability across the villages in the country, every Mama Mboga has one, that Kenya is a serious country to talk with when it comes to policies to manage the internet and the distribution of content online. This is what Thomas Friedman said. So if I can just bring it back to the floor and make it easier for you, that every morning in Africa, a gazelle wakes up. It knows it must run faster than the fastest lion or it will be killed. Every morning a lion wakes up in Africa, it knows it must outrun the slowest gazelle or to starve to death. It doesn't matter whether you are a lion or a gazelle, when the sun comes up in Africa, you better start running. And I think we can translate that simple paradigm to the use of ICTs, that we are a global village. The world is a global village, so we can't do without it. We can't do without OTTs. They are for our benefit. But regulation must go hand in hand with growth of any industry.
Thank you, Mutu.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I talk after my boss. He's still my boss. He's ICT information.
Right now, don't worry. I'm his boss as well.
Yes, and I'm here to also bring out what's happening here. I'm going to move away a bit on technical, and part of the discussions was on local content. So that's what I feel that I should bring.
We'll talk about local content, but I just wanted to get your perspective in terms of should we or should we not regulate OTTs?
Let me say, okay, when I want to put something online, how sure am I that it's the right content, it will go to the right person, there will be no scamming? So I think from my side, it's important to think about, there should be some standards set so that when something goes online, and nowadays everybody is going online, even online content, but then of course there are all the advantages of it will be seen by everybody, disadvantage might be used for the wrong purpose. So to me, I think there should be some standards.
Standards, okay. So I'm going to zero in a specific area, and this is, I think this is the most vocal people who are calling for regulation are actually the telcos. And Fiona, those are your members, right? So how do we, because they have a valid, they have sort of a valid concern that most of these services are, they're making money on their infrastructure without any compliance obligations, etc. So how do we make our telcos comfortable with what we all feel that we should not regulate, or we should regulate with caution?
I think from our study, we did go through all our members, and 3 of them are the 3 operators currently existing in the Kenyan market, who also gave us their feedback. And the issue that comes out clearly is that the mobile operators who have not looked at, for starters, innovative ways of delivering their services. They are doing the traditional calling, voice, SMSing, and their pricing is managed in that particular manner, feel the pinch of the OTTs. But for the operators, the telcos that have become a bit more innovative, and have therefore looked at it slightly differently and seen the opportunity in the OTTs, because the demand for OTT services has resulted in increased demand in bandwidth and data services for the mobile operators. It has also increased the traffic on the networks, and therefore, and then they've also, for those who have changed from the traditional revenue streams and incorporated OTTs from a customer's perspective, they aren't feeling the pinch. They are actually seeing a lot more opportunity and are able to make more out of it. So some of the things that came out of our study were, for example, the telcos would need to introduce smart plans, as the case has been in the more matured markets where the OTTs have been, they have survived, they have not been regulated, and those markets are doing well. So because we went out and during the ICANN meetings, we sat with peers from around the world and we gave them the questionnaires, and they were responding to the questionnaires, and so from the data they gave, in the more matured markets, they have smart plans for the customers that bundle together various services and give the telco an opportunity to gain revenue off the OTT without having to disrupt existing regulatory framework. The second thing is being able to have differentiated quality positioning. So you have your services and you have them categorized according to the benefits the service is offering vis-a-vis the price that you will be making out of it. And so when the consumer is coming on board, they know that I'm getting this service and this service gives me this quality of, data access. And this quality of data access will allow me XYZ in terms of being able to access the OTTs. So that becomes a pricing model that can be used. So the issue is that the telcos have to change from their traditional pricing regimes to be more innovative in how they offer the service. And right now, in the more developed markets, as there's more penetration and more internet access, the challenge then is on which telco has more value adds to differentiate themselves over the others. And that is the role that now the OTTs come into play. And that's why you'll find in other parts of the world, a telco will partner with the Facebooks and want to get all their customers having, oh, we give you this service, you pay for this, and you get free Facebook. Why? Because that is what gives them an edge over the others. So in the telcos, the business development guys within the telcos don't step out of the box. They can complain until their kingdom come. And we may never get a solution for them, because even if we were to license the OTTs cannot operate without that infrastructure.
Good. So, Facebook, WhatsApp, those are global companies. If Safaricom came to Facebook and told you to co-invest because you're running services on top of the infrastructure, is that a discussion that, to co-invest in infrastructure development?
So let me answer that secondly, because I think the first thing is, I think the premise that content is riding on top of infrastructure, I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, so Airtel, all of these companies, they get money from consumers, so the consumers are paying, so it's not as it's free. It is not then the role of the company to decide what kind of content consumers can access. I mean, that makes no sense. So consumers have paid for the opportunity to use the services, and at that point, they can use whatever services they want as long as those services are not illegal. So that's where I think that's pretty clear. Having said that, and I cannot agree enough with what Fiona said about developing innovative business models, and this is why I said at the beginning that the role of government